Alright, we are recording for Chapter 4 of Attack of the Clones, which is some middle one. That one. Don't have too many notes here. It's not a very long chapter, and in some ways not a lot happens. It is, I'm pretty sure, the opening of the movie, though. It's been a while since I've watched through Attack of the Clones, but I'm pretty sure that it does start with Senator Amidala's return to Coruscant and the ship being destroyed, showing that there are immediately setting the tone of it being tense, that there are assassination attempts going on, all that, even without the crawl, telling us some of that. Yeah, really all my notes have to do with that, so I'll skip it for the moment. We do also have, we're over and seeing Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's admonishing Anakin because apparently he, set the computer to exit hyperspace a little bit closer to Coruscant to get them a few more hours there, because he's very much looking forward to seeing Padme, and Obi-Wan is just like, don't do that. You can't do that. Coruscant is so busy, it's potentially dangerous, and it's, hang on. Actually, he did get a line. Obi-Wan did. Yeah, I know that you're anxious to get there. We have been too long away from home. So it's like Obi-Wan is not really thinking that, oh no, it's because he wants to see Padme. But never do this again. It's like, it is continuing with the whole, I think that, how Anakin was raised and that he basically is in a dysfunctional family situation, is part of the issue for him later on, or is a cause for some of the issues or an explanation for some of the issues. So this, where it's like Obi-Wan is like, don't ever do that again. But isn't even like aware that, oh, it's because the senator is going to be there. But oh yeah, you want to get home. It's not you want to see her. I think that's continuing to show that dysfunction. But anyway, one thing mentioned that I find a little annoying. At least, okay, in one way it's good because it does confirm one thing that I basically said seemed to be the case in the Phantom Menace, but also it functionally makes no sense. For how they describe the galaxy, and that is that the Republic Army is to assist the Jedi, assuming it is formed. It is to assist the Jedi, so it is that the Jedi effectively serve as the military for the Senate. Which, in some ways, this makes sense. On the other hand, though, then you shouldn't have the singular Jedi temple. You shouldn't have such a concentration of Jedi only at Coruscant. They should be spread out, which was one of the criticisms I had for the Phantom Menace. It also poses another problem, and this is one of those flimsy and fragile things for the Phantom Menace, in that when they're like, oh, we should send a commission there to confirm that, her allegations are true, because they're clearly false, that, and all that, and it's like, if they had just gone, we had 2 Jedi who were sent as ambassadors and had their ship destroyed by the Trade Federation, we can go get them if you want. If the Jedi are already seen as the military for the Senate, their testimony would be at least equal to such a commission. And they could already get it. They just need to call them over. So, because, think about it, they would also be the ones that, if the Trade Federation is committing these acts of war, it would be the Jedi that would be sent there to end that. So it makes sense that their testimony would be accepted, but nope, we're completely ignoring that because Phantom Menace is flimsy and fragile. Anyway, yeah, so there's still some structural issues, I think, with how the Jedi are described as functioning in this, but whatever. Moving on from that. Got to put in an extra line break there. One thing that happened, and it's technical. It is a technical thing. Maybe I should be saying pedantic. But it is still, seeing it there is annoying. I'm pretty sure I had already talked about chapter 2, I think, is when we are introduced to Typho, who is Panaka's nephew, and is put in charge of Padme's security detail. Well, he's here again because he's traveling with her to protect her, and we get reintroduced that, he's Panaka's nephew and really a lot like him in the adherence to duty stuff, and he's wearing and he's got the eye patch and all that blah blah blah. It's like we already know all this. You already told us this. So I'm kind of wondering, and this is potentially correct. As far as it makes sense to me. If the movie does start with this chapter, and I think it does. I know that scene in the movie at least very early. I'm just not sure if it is the first one. But if that's the case, then it makes sense to reintroduce there if it was well, this is where the movie starts, so you have to have it reflect that kind of thing. Which is not good for a book, but for just straight trying to have the movie in the book, it does make sense. I don't think it's a good reason, but that does at least make some sense to me. One other thing that it did that I actually find a little annoying. I guess it doesn't call her Padme, but its description. So in the Phantom Menace, we have the whole Padme is using a decoy, for a lot of the story, and she does go back and forth depending on the situation, but is using a decoy for a lot of it. And Padme is basically always referred to as Padme, sometimes with the Naberi last name, but basically always as Padme. And Queen Amidala would be, whether it is her or the decoy, is always the Queen or Queen Amidala. But that's then revealed. Obviously, we know at the end that she'd been doing this. Now she's using a decoy again here, and I feel like, okay, you do that, but then don't give the name. Just hide it a little bit better than saying next came Amidala, even though we're coming down the walkway, the ramp from the ship that's about to be blown up. Don't name her. I feel, because it's like she's already using the decoy. Describe next came, because it then goes into in her typical splendor with her paradoxical beauty, both simple and involved. A little bit of an aside here. Beauty in many cases is from simple stuff. So it's like, to me, it's like, well, that's not paradoxical. That's just woman knows how to dress appropriately. I mean, essentially, sometimes being too involved with it or being too elaborate makes it ugly, not beautiful. But anyway, but you could have essentially just left out that it was Amidala. You could just start talking about next comes this beautiful woman in senatorial robes, because it does go on and talk about that. Well, it's senatorial attire. So you could do that. So you're implying that it is the senator, when in fact it isn't. So that way you're not lying to the reader at any point here. Especially because if you already know the first book or first movie, then it's like, oh, well, you know that decoys were used there. So like here, yeah, we're not going to lie to you at all. We're just going to hide it. So then you're assuming that it isn't using a decoy, whereas here you're basically telling us, no, we're not using decoy. Oh, wait, no, we are. So yeah, I don't much care for that. And that is just, you could write it a little differently. And achieve that end without causing a problem. The last thing, many knew that Senator Amidala of Naboo was returning to the Senate to cast her vote against the creation of an army, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't the Jedi Temple that beckoned to the Padawan, Anakin, but rather a rumor he had heard over the comm chatter that a certain senator, formerly the Queen of Naboo, was on her way to address the Senate. I just find this a little annoying, because, like, it's not a rumor. Many people knew. You'd think that would, in fact, be news, because she is staunchly against it. This is established already. It's the biggest debate currently happening with the Senate, with the Republic. Her returning to vote is big news. So, yeah, it is reasonable that he would know, and it would be more than just a rumor. It would be part of the news. So I just find that a little odd, because it's like, oh yeah, all these people knew too. Well, only a few people. Hang on. Okay. I just wasn't sure with my hand waving if I was setting off the thing. Yeah, not a very long chapter. One thing though that did it well, it's occurred to me before, but yeah, but just now here in 10 minutes, I'll talk about this. A couple aspects about Coruscant and its whole a planet that's an entire city. A couple things about that I think are worth noting about if you get into the technical stuff here, which I like doing. You start to realize something about Coruscant that actually would help demonstrate how it is going to be corrupt. Um, I'm just trying to remember. I know what one of them is, but I feel like the other may have just been a spin-off of that, or maybe it was just that point that obviously would be corrupt. It's described as the city covers the planet, as in it has buried even like the original natural formation. So here, let me. That actually I think was right at the beginning. Yeah. Um, the four starships skimmed past the great skyscrapers of Coruscant, weaving in and out of the huge amber structures, artificial stalagmites rising higher and higher over the years, and now obscuring the natural formations of the planet unlike anywhere else in the known galaxy. So what occurred to me with that, or rather, I remembered, occurred to me previously, is that the only way Coruscant could be built up that way is because it's obscuring the natural formations. That to me implies the materials for the city didn't come from the planet. It was imported. They came from other places. Which would mean then that Coruscant may have been built not on its own work, its own achievements, at least for the materials, but by others, it coming in from others. Which would basically mean then that the people of Coruscant don't understand production. And it's also if it is a singular city, potentially they're not even growing their own food. So they don't have farmers there. They don't have people there that understand what actually goes into getting these materials, getting these resources. And it's like, yeah, that's going to breed corruption because you think that this stuff is just available. So somewhere like Tatooine, where even the water is hard to come by, would be shocking for these people and be like, wow, if they're even able to be cognizant of it, being like, I had no idea that this is involved. I thought it was just there. And the whole food comes from the grocery stores or water comes from the faucet kind of thing. As opposed to, no, it comes from other places and has to go through a lot of processing. But yeah, I mean, but it does make sense for why that would be so corrupt. Because they basically have no, I'm not sure what the best word going with it, but they have no sense of responsibility for manufacture, for creation. It's just not there. Yeah. I mean, it's also just the idea of a singular planet that is that developed. I mean, is stupid. Let's be honest, it's stupid. But it falls in line with the still stupid aspect of Star Wars worlds of them being monobiomes. Like, Tatooine is a singular biome. Hoth is, well, okay, Hoth, it makes a little bit of sense because the whole thing is frozen. So it's like you would have a state for a planet in that situation where, yeah, it is just all frozen, would be one biome. Tatooine, though, well, Tatooine either shouldn't be habitable or it should have greater variation than just a huge desert. But Endor, that being described as a forest moon, no, that would have multiple biomes in there and so on. So it does, but Star Wars is very much guilty of monobiome planets, and it seems like Coruscant is just an extension of that, where the monobiome in this case is city. But I mean, it's just one of those. If you're going to write science fiction, and you want to do something like that, I would just say either make sure you don't do monobiomes, or make sure that when it comes to a city planet like Coruscant, that it is all reasoned out. That you can, if somebody would ask, well, how was that built? You can say, this is how they mined out their own planet. This is what resources they brought in from other planets. It's like, this is how all that worked. Because it's also such nonsense that you would have such a high population density there, and like how you were managing all these ships coming in and out. Yeah. I mean, because it also is one of those things where when you think about it, and I actually do this in A Letter from Catherine, I'm just remembering now, I hadn't thought about this before. You wouldn't have a large ship coming in and landing on Coruscant. It would be too dangerous. You'd have it stop at a space station that's further out and then taking a shuttle down that would be much smaller. Because that would be much, much safer. And as far as any like large goods, so like a tanker type ship, freight ship, you would have designated areas that those would go to, so you'd be able to control that. But the idea of like, oh no, they're landing the ship that came from Naboo right next door to the senatorial apartments, which also is kind of stupid if you have an issue with assassination attempts. But anyway, it would make sense that would stop at a. I was grabbing a letter from Catherine that there's multiple space stations, two different classes, multiple space stations though around Earth that you stop there and then you take that. You take a shuttle from there down to the planet, and you'd also take a shuttle back. Yeah, it's like that actually would make more sense for how some of this traffic goes, because it would alleviate the traffic by using smaller craft that would basically always have a guaranteed route, as opposed to this ship that is just apparently flying in. No, we're going here. Yeah. Okay. See you next time for Chapter 5, right? Yes, Chapter 5. See you then.